1935, the Lions win the NFL championship. The Detroit Tigers take the World Series. The Red Wings bring home Lord Stanley's Cup. Joe Louis begins his rise to world domination. This transforms the Motor City into Detroit, City of Champions.
And with that, we are launched. We are in the water. It's Detroit City of Champions, the podcast. I'm Jamie Flanagan.
Charles Avison.
And we are talking about Gar Wood. We are 3 episodes in. We've led in. We've done some history, and we kind of met Gar
just briefly at the very end of the last show.
Yeah.
Today we're gonna really meet him. But yeah, because the first 2 episodes we were really focusing on Chris Smith, and then Algonac, talking about the Harmsworth Trophy, talking about just a lot of the components. What a hydroplane boat is.
Yeah.
You know, some of the laying the groundwork for what we're going to be talking about. So there's
so
that people have an idea what we're talking about here. So
just want to thank everybody for joining us, coming along. Make sure you like, subscribe, and more importantly, tell a friend, and then tell about 100 more.
Well, if everybody tells a friend, and then we get those friends watching, and those friends tell a friend, and all this, it sparks and all this.
But we want to thank you for taking some time and joining us with the podcast, and so it's liking it, subscribing, collecting, whatever it is on the podcast or outlet that you're listening to. You can also watch it on Facebook and on YouTube as the magic unfolds, and we get deeper into this story of the 33 championships from around Detroit,
1935,
all in 1935, and right now we're focused on a motorboat.
Yeah, like I said before, once we start getting into it, we're going to see just how
Speedboat Kings. That book is amazing.
It's my favorite. Yeah, it's my favorite. It's just my favorite story of all of them, and so where we left off last week was that we talked about Chris Smith for a couple of, for how his career unfolded.
Sure.
He had the first gasoline powered boat on the Great Lakes, and Algonac was just we talked about how the sportsmen went out to Algonac, and he's from St. Louis, and he goes out there and he's probably maybe seen a couple of speedboats in his life, and he goes out to Algonac and the whole river's full of them.
Right.
And he's just like, what is going on out here? Who started this? Then he finds the source of it all, which was Chris Smith, which a lot of people know with the name Chris Craft. Chris Smith. And so that's where. And so he's a sportsman. He's got connections in New York, and there's these growing races for power boating. And so he tells his friend in New York about Chris Smith, and gets Chris Smith to. They make a deal where Chris Smith sells him 3 boats. Yep. The boats go out to Iowa, competing for the 4th of July races in Iowa, and they win the races. And then the the story is just evolving where Chris Smith is growing, and so it comes to a point where Detroit wanted in on the action, especially with this growing prestige of the Gold Cup races, and so the Chris Smith has find himself at the time he has we talk about how he has a dream where he's building boats for Detroit in essence. And so a group of people are formed, and they all sort of crowdsource for him to build a boat, and that first boat is the Miss Detroit.
Hey.
And so the Miss Detroit goes on to win the Gold Cup. They bring the Gold Cup to Detroit. And they have in the following year, however, the Miss Detroit group is basically just doesn't have any money. They don't have any money, so they can't really afford to pay them. And so the Miss Detroit, basically, usually what happens is for these races every year you're upgrading the boats. You have to upgrade them because because the technology, just like anything, is growing quick.
Yeah.
And so because they can't really afford to pay him, and they ended up having to basically rerun the same Miss Detroit from the previous year, and he ended up taking a job building a boat for a sportsman from Minneapolis. So he built from Minnesota. So he builds this boat, the Miss Minneapolis, and on the Detroit River, the Miss Minneapolis beats the Miss Detroit.
That's not cool.
So the Gold Cup, is goes to Minnesota, and so we left off last week where. The Miss Detroit, the boat is just beat up, and there's just nothing left to it really, and they're just trying to basically sell it for whatever they can get for it, and that's when Garwood steps up and says, "Hey, I'm interested in that boat if you're trying to sell it." And that's when everything takes a huge turn, and that's why we kind of left off with there, because it's kind of a dramatic ending where we leave
like,
off.
Can he afford it?
And they're like, he's good for $1 million. Yeah,
if he's good for $1, he's good for $1 million.
Exactly.
Whatever,
yeah. So he's like, all I have is a voucher on me, right? I can give you a check, and they're like, is he good for eight whatever it was, a $2,000 check or whatever? And he's like, yeah, he's good for it. He's good for $1 million.
He's good for it.
Yeah. So anyways, and so they were like, that man was Garwood. That was like kind of where we left off. So yeah. So now it's the kind of backstory, a little bit of Garwood, and in his story, his story is incredible, really, just leading up to everything.
All right.
Born on December 4th, 1880, in Mapletown, Iowa. His full name Garfield Arthur Wood. So one of 13 children. The family moved to Minnesota where his father was a ferry boat operator on a lake called Lake Osakis. Yes. So in his youth he demonstrates tremendous engineering talent. So he's like a tinkerer and doing all these different things. So in the same year, 1893, he's 13 years old, and the 1893 is the same year that Chris Smith first drove that first gasoline-powered boat in the Great Lakes.
Okay.
Garwood was doing the same thing in Minnesota. So he was building his own gas-powered boat in Minnesota.
But he wasn't making no 19 miles an hour.
No, he was
because that's what that first one did, right?
No, Chris Smith's original boat was about the same. Chris Smith's original boat was 9 miles an hour.
9 miles an hour.
Garwood's boat was going. They said it was an 16-foot boat, and it went 8 miles an hour. So it was right about in that same range.
Liquid lightning out there.
so same year, that Garwood's doing the same thing in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And so this is where it gets interesting, because in nowhere that I've seen when I was putting the book together, that's where, like, those are the sort of you can tell those are kind of like the generic facts, because I'm just basically going down the list, read them off. But this is where, I'm kind of proud of myself for finding this information, and really why, like, a Michigan researcher kind of has a little bit of an advantage, because if you go, so I got it when I was going to doing art shows, and I was going, like I say, like the Algonac Historical Museum, the Garwood Museum in Algonac.
Sure.
That's like my Graceland. They have a statue of Garwood out front,
nice.
And it's just this cool little building with just a ton of memorabilia and stuff in there. And they had a video there that they were selling, and the video is called "Building the Miss America 10."
Oh.
And so I've got the video. I've been looking all over for it. I don't know where it's at the exact moment. I'm trying to find it so we can maybe get a couple clips. I know I'm gonna find it.
All I know is I just keep Googling Miss America X.
Yeah. You've been finding some different stuff on there?
I've been finding different things.
Oh, yeah. So,
but we found the Miss America 10. It's at the Packard plant. So we're gonna go hang out with it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. For gearheads or people that are into these into these boating this boating world, they are like diehards. Like, I was reading a couple articles today, and I was like, this stuff was amazing. I was reading stuff today that I've never even heard of, and I was like, just because I was getting ready for this show, and I'm like, man, there's just some cool stuff. It takes you down some rabbit holes that are just fascinating. But anyways, so in this video, the video was made in 1985. Right. Again, the video is called "Building the Miss America 10," and I don't know if they still have it there or not. I'm looking for my copy.
Right.
I got it around somewhere, but It's an amazing video. But anyways, on the video, it's got Garwood Jr., who himself is on the City of Champions newspaper as the national outboard motor champion of 1935. He's one of the 33 champions of the year.
Father and son.
Exactly. So Garwood Jr. on the video, of course, he's grown up at this point in the video. He talks about two specific stories that, listening to this show, like, as far as I'm aware, I mean, maybe this stuff is somewhere. Maybe somebody listened to the video, watched the video, and put it into an article somewhere that I'm just not familiar with. But when I was researching this book, I had no idea. There's two. It's really one question that I'd never had answered anywhere, which was, how did Garwood get the money? Where did his wealth come from?
Yeah.
Because his father was a ferry boat operator. That doesn't, where did he get the ridiculous sums of money he needed to finance, which is, basically a rich man's sport.
Yeah.
You're building these boats at spare no expense type of thing. You're building new hulls just for new engines and stuff. So where did he get his money? That was a question I was looking for really all over the place, and it was found on this movie, which was Garwood Jr. telling the story of how his dad had made his original
fortune.
fortune. Yes.
Nice.
And so so of course this is an anecdotal story, but it's coming from his son. So and then the facts
our family before, and
the facts will match up to to it for exactly like for the ensuing information. But anyway, so as his son tells the story, his father, and this is in 1911. And his father at the time was Garwood Sr.'s 31 years old, and he's a traveling lightning rod salesman. Okay.
Okay.
And actually, this I got to take a step back because this is actually before he made his fortune. So this is a couple. So these are 2 points in the video. Okay, I kind of put them in order of what happened first, and this isn't how he made his fortune, but it's interesting nonetheless. So in 1911, he's a traveling lightning rod salesman, and he goes to attend this. And he's living in Iowa. He's in Iowa, and he goes to this 4th of July boat race, which we already mentioned. This is where Chris Smith was taking his boats for these to race them in that. So anyways, at this boat race, there's this owner whose boat wasn't starting.
Oh.
And Gar would say, "Hey, I think I can help you get that thing going."
Because he was a tinkerer. And
and he'd also built a boat, the first boat on the in Minnesota, right? So anyways, so dressed in his like Sunday best because he was just there to watch the races. He gets into the boat and gets the boat started, but because it took so long to get the boat started and the race was about to start, he stayed in the boat, raced the boat around, and won that race. Yeah, so that's
great.
A totally anecdotal story that comes from his son. The boat was called the Leading Lady.
Okay,
all right, so that's like sort of anecdotal story.
That was his first real run. It was like his first real run.
Yeah.
Nice.
So anyway, so that brings up how he made his fortune. So which is 2 years later.
Okay.
So this story takes place in St. Paul, Minnesota. So the story goes that Gar Wood was, walking down the street, and whatever, sitting there eating. I heard, I think he maybe even said in the video that he was eating a sandwich.
Eating a
sandwich on his lunch break. And he watched, he was sitting there, and a truck pulls up, a flatbed truck pulls up, and the back of the truck was full of 2 tons of coal.
Okay.
And he sat there while he's eating his lunch, and he just watched these 2 delivery drivers shoveling the coal off of the truck onto whatever it was, the loading dock or whatever it was. But these guys had to manually shovel this 2 tons of coal off.
There's got to be an easier way.
Exactly. That's what he thought to himself. And so he came up with he started a company called Wood Hydraulic Hoist and Body Company.
Okay.
So we have a little advertisement for this is down there. This is like in the 50s, but you can see like how big it was. So he invented the hydraulic hoist for trucks so that it could just literally, like a dump truck, could just dump the bed and then go instead of having to have these guys just shovel it all off.
Yeah.
And so he patented the hoist. The hydraulic hoist for vehicles,
automotive. There's forklifts in there, and there's all kinds of stuff.
So exactly. So this is the sort of final evolution by the by the 50s or whatever when they got these dump trucks. But anyway, so that's a huge development for a vehicle for a truck to be able to just dump its cargo and go. So anyway, so the Wood Hydraulic Hoist and Body Company, which was later changed to Garwood Industries. Of course, where are you going to go to build to sell that part and to manufacture the part and install it into vehicles?
We're going to go to Detroit.
Detroit,
that's
exactly.
Where you're going to go.
So that's how he ended up in Detroit.
All right.
And so, of course, with this patent, with this thing for his vehicles,
hell yeah,
he's now this is what he is the if you're going to build a vehicle with a hydraulic hoist on it, you got to go to Garwood. So he rose and that's where he made his money. So anyways, and that's according to his son. I've never, like I said, I was working on the book and that, I couldn't find any story about that anywhere. That comes straight from his son on the Building the Miss America 10 movie from the Algonac Historical Museum.
All right.
So anyways, so that's where he made his money. So okay, so that's like, so we're going to kind of take the fairly next decent stuff. So that's 1913. And so I just want to throw out another sort of story about it's one of those stories that it's just kind of important just to kind of discuss before we move on. So Garwood was married to a woman named Merlin, and so we have a picture of her on this thing too. And so we wanted so there's one sort of component I want to talk about because I don't know really where to slide it into the story except for right now just to talk about it because it's really cool. But
sure,
and this is going to apply to every story that comes from hereafter. So we got to talk about it at some point. So anyways, so Gar Wood had these two, had a good luck charm.
Right.
And he had these two teddy bears, who is right in this photo we have on the screen, as being held by his wife Merlin.
Mm-hmm.
And so these are his good luck charms, but so there's a kind of a story behind, how these things came into being, because he raced, that's what he was synonymous for. We're going to find way more pictures. We're going to show way more pictures where these teddy bears are lashed to the to the engine of the boat, where they're racing, and these bears are prominent in every single boat that he's in. So anyway, so this is the quote. This comes from Speedboat Kings with J. Lee Barrett. Mm-hmm. So here it says, so just before I left Wood's home that night, I asked him one more question. We were standing near the door. My hand was already on the latch. How is it, Mr. Wood? I said. How is it you are alive today? Don't you know? He asked. And then suddenly he had gone back to where we'd been sitting. I stood there waiting and wondering. He came back in a moment holding his two teddy bears, Teddy and Bruin, in the fingers of his right hand. Here's the reason, he said, seriously. These are the captains of my fate, mine and Orland Johnson's. For 30 years, Wood has been tying these teddy bears to his engines. A fortune cannot buy them from him. Wood stole these teddy bears 30 years ago from Mrs. Wood, his wife. She had bought the first one for 15 cents in St. Paul, Minnesota, where they lived. When Wood saw it in their home, he took it and put it in his race boat, Little Leading Lady. He won every race with that boat. So Mrs. Wood bought another. Wood stole that one too. When he built his Miss Detroit too. Mrs. Wood saw her lost teddy bears for the first time. She made each of them a cork life-saving jacket, a bathing cap, rubber-soled shoes. She even stuffed their ears with batting to keep out the thunder of the engines. Mm-hmm. She gave them to Wood and asked him to put them in his new boat for luck. Wood smiled and tied them to his engines, but Mrs. Wood fondles them as her own, as indeed they are. She dries them out whenever they're pitched overboard, dresses them up again. Wood will never go out on the river in his fast boats without them.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So, from the very beginning, they had these in Minnesota before they even moved to Detroit. That's what I was saying. That's why I wanted to kind of slip this in before we sort of advance the story. Is these teddy bears are like...
Because I've seen them in the photos that we've gone through, and I love this.
That's what I'm saying. So this is a direct quote from talking about this is J. Lee Barrett asking Gar Wood about the bears.
Okay.
This is not Wikipedia saying, oh, he had these bears that were his good luck charms. These are literally asking from the mouth of Gar Wood about these bears.
Because that J. Lee Barrett was on site. He's
asking Wood. He's probably having drinks with him this night, and asking Gar Wood.
Tell me about them bears.
How do you get through all this? So anyways, that's straight from the mouth of Gar Wood. Why you see why these teddy bears are so prominent.
I love it.
Yeah. So, all right. So now we're at the point that we sort of left off last episode, where Gar Wood buys the Miss Detroit, so recognizing,
was it Miss Detroit or Miss America?
The Miss America's here. We haven't even got anywhere near.
Oh, that was
yet.
Miss Detroit.
So we're at the last episode, the end of the last episode, he bought the Miss Detroit.
Okay, that was Miss Detroit.
Because it was the whole Miss Detroit, boat building association.
Right,
so, anyways, so because the Miss Detroit was falling into disrepair, Chris Smith has no money. He's taking jobs with to build the Miss Minneapolis. He's winning races for Minnesota. Mm-hmm. So the whole thing is really falling apart until Gar Wood steps in and he says, at that auction, I'll take that boat. So not only did he take the boat, but he also bought a controlling interest in Chris Smith's company, which was called C.C. Smith Boat and Engine Company.
Okay.
So it's sort of a summary of events. 1915, Miss Detroit wins the Gold Cup at the Manhasset Bay in New York. 1916, Miss Minneapolis wins the Gold Cup in Detroit. All right, so that's where we're at right now, and that's when the Miss Detroit is number one is sold.
Yeah.
So 1917, this is Gar Wood's first Gold Cup, which is now he upgrades the Miss Detroit into the Miss Detroit 2. Okay. And in that race, they beat the Miss Minneapolis.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah, so they're back on the hump, and Gar Wood wins his first Gold Cup. And so with Gar Wood driving and Chris Smith's son Jay as the mechanic, they set a new Gold Cup record with a race time of 61.72 miles an hour.
All right.
So we've talked about how these boats are sort of slowly coming up.
Yeah.
Right?
What was the speed on that again?
61.72 miles an hour. So now they're hitting 61 miles an hour.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That's cruising.
That's getting fast.
They're 61 miles an hour now. Like I say, just a little refresher where we're at. 1893, 9 miles an hour.
9 miles
I've been keeping
an
track of this.
Yeah.
I've been writing down significant towns so we can rip through it.
Yeah.
1893, 9 miles an hour. 1910, 35 miles an hour. So in 1912 area, they're going between 43 and 53.
Yeah.
1917, where we're at right now, Miss Detroit, 61 miles an hour. That's lightning.
Yeah.
Compared to where they'd been, you know. So anyways, so the Miss Detroit 2 does this. So anyways, now now they're looking, okay, they won their first Gold Cup. That's great. So now, so what does it say here? It's at this moment, 1917, that America enters World War I, and so the country is in this the country's in this rapid push to develop engines for airplanes, and but the problem is, one of the problems is that they're wanting to like sort of take this to the next level, and they come up with this new idea that they want to start potentially use airplane engines for boats. Because they're lighter, they have more horsepower in this. They want to potentially use airplanes. The problem, though, is that with World War I on, they can't. This is basically a secondary sport. You know what I mean? They can't divert an airplane engine from the factory to build a boat. Because it could go and help soldiers stay alive.
Sure.
And so there was a guy named Glenn Curtiss, and this is where I was really going down a rabbit hole. Because people may have heard of like the Curtiss aircraft, from way back in the day, but when you start to look into Glenn Curtiss, like seriously, if you when this show is over, look up Glenn. If you're listening to this, look up Glenn Curtiss from the Curtiss of airplane fame, because this guy is like, you cannot believe all the stuff this guy did. They did a show called The Aviator, or was it The Aviator about Howard Hughes? Yeah. Man, that Howard Hughes got nothing on Glenn Curtiss.
Wow.
This guy, when you're reading just a list of facts about this guy's life, you just can't. I don't even want to listen because it wouldn't even do it justice. But it's just like, it's crazy. His the stuff he did goes back to the end of the 19th century. Like, he's in the 1800s doing stuff with dirigibles and engines for dirigibles, and setting land speed records on these motorcycles going 130 miles an hour that look like they're a bicycle with an engine, tightened into. It's crazy. He's had a fascinating story. And he was an engineer. He was an engine developer, and so he was developing all these engines, and he'd been developing an engine for airplanes for use in the military. In fact, he'd already built several for military aircraft. He was building planes he built like the first plane that took off from a battleship. He's doing all this naval aircraft. And so anyways, but the aircraft he designed for use in World War I didn't really catch on. Like, they didn't want his design. Yeah. And so all the energy that he put into developing this engine basically left him kind of financially strapped. Okay. And so he basically the engine he developed for it was called the Curtiss. It was called the Curtiss engine. It never went into production, so there was only a handful of them. And so he was kind of hurting for cash. And Gar Wood, and so what the guy did was he mounted his engine into a boat called the Miss Miami down in Florida. All right. And so anyways, Gar Wood is like already thinking about this idea. And so because he's like, well, I can't take an engine that they're using for the war, but I can take an engine that they rejected. Yeah. Right? And so he hears about, especially the fact that this guy had already started tinkering around with using an engine in a boat. Yeah. And he wasn't really, I don't think he was even racing it. He just had it in his boat. Yeah. And he was just seeing what it could do. So anyway, Gar Wood buys the engine from him, right? And so to use in his boat. And so, it's a good thing that he did, because it was at this exact moment. So as the 1917 rolls into 1918, the APBA, which is the American Powerboat Association, who's in charge of the Gold Cup. The president of the entire commission, his name is Commodore A.L. Judson. He wants to bring the Gold Cup back to New York. He wants to bring the Gold Cup back to New York, and they basically are about to spare no expense.
I don't think so.
Yeah, so they're basically sparing no expense. So what they do is this A.L. Judson hires two of Chris Smith's top mechanics So they basically poach his two best engineers from Chris Smith.
Of guns.
And brings them out to New York to build his boats so they can take the Gold Cup, bring it back to New York, and end this whole thing and make New York once again the capital of speedboat racing.
Yeah.
So this is Garwood's first. This was kind of important to talk about here. This is Garwood's first serious challenge in the boat building world.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a dedicated, determined group who wants the Gold Cup, and they're tired of it being in Detroit and being around this Detroit world.
Yeah.
They think it belongs in New York, and that's where the races should be. Yeah. And so Garwood, of course, is going to have something to say about this. And so there's rumors of this boat that these two Chris Smith mechanics had built. The boat is called the Whippoorwill Jr.
Right.
And the rumor is that this boat was reaching 69 miles per hour.
Okay. So we were at 61 last. All right.
So they're like, this boat goes
it's a challenge.
69 miles an hour. Yeah. So anyway, I'm going to read a little quote from Speedboat Kings to talk about sort of what happened, because what happens next, because now, so they've got this Curtis engine. They can't just we got this sweet engine, we're going to stick it in the boat and all this is done with. No, It takes way more time than that. And this is what we're one of the main emphasis of the entire story is not even so much the races themselves, but the engineering that went behind it.
Right.
And so this is what this is straight out of Speedboat Kings, page 36. So right here. So all right. So I'll just start right from the top there. Okay, so when Wood this is actually the very beginning of chapter 4. So when Wood said to me at his Greyhaven home that night, "We've been up against this thing before, these superior boats," I asked him what he meant. Then he told me Martin and Jack Beebe of Detroit built the Whippoorwill Jr. for A.L. Judson of New York, president of the American Powerboat Association. Judson said, "I'm going to bring the Gold Cup trophy back east. That's where it belongs, in the east." And he meant it. Until 1915, the Gold Cup trophy had always been held in the east. It was regarded as an Eastern trophy, and then suddenly, as swift as a modern air raid, the Miss Detroit 1 thundered east and won the trophy. For the first time in its history, it was taken west, and Detroit still held the coveted prize in 1917. That fact irritated Eastern sportsmen. That's why Judson stepped into the arena. His Whippoorwill Jr., built in Detroit, was a 28-footer powered by a 12-cylinder Van Blurk engine that developed 600 horsepower. Judson and Jack Beebe took it to Lake George, New York, and on September 6, 1917, put it across a measured mile at 69.39 miles an hour. They boasted it was the fastest boat afloat. Judson challenged Wood for the Gold Cup. There was serious doubts in Wood's mind that the Whippoorwill Jr. ever hit 69 miles an hour or even 60 miles an hour. But there was the unofficial record, and he had to make his plans to defend the cup.
Yeah.
The only defending boat Wood had was his Miss Detroit 2. Wood wanted a better, faster boat. He talked to several engineers about putting an airplane engine in a boat. Marine engines were, so this is kind of going a little bit earlier. This is, before I've already told a little bit of the story.
Yeah.
But he talked to several engineers about putting an airplane engine in a boat. Marine engines were heavy. Wood wanted a light, fast engine on the old theory of lightweight per horsepower. The engineers were skeptical, advised against it. They thought it was the creation of a mad brain. But Wood was stubborn. If we want speed, he said, we've got to cut weight. Wood knew that Glenn Curtis of the Curtis Engine Company had been using an airplane engine in his Miss Miami, a boat that had traveled 55 miles an hour with an air propeller. Curtis had been given an order by the British government during the war to build a 12-cylinder V-type engine of lightweight and high power. He built several of these engines. They were all rejected by the British, and Curtis had sustained a tremendous loss. Commodore C.D. Cutting, a friend of Glenn Curtis, told Wood he thought he could get one of those engines. Wood said, "Fine, I'll buy it if you can." Cutting got the engine for Wood. It was shipped to Wood's plant in Detroit. Through the entire winter, Wood worked on it. Before he finished, he had increased the propeller revolutions from 1,650 per minute to 2,000.
Uh-oh.
He also decreased the engine weight from 1,320 pounds to 1,250 pounds.
Uh-oh.
That was 400 pounds less weight than the weight of the Sterling engines in his Miss Detroit 2. Wood, satisfied, told the Smith boys to start work on a new hull. They climbed into their overalls, rolled up their sleeves, and went to work. They'd done that before many times. The thing they created was a masterpiece. The Miss Detroit 3 was made out of 7 different kinds of wood, the finest speedboat ever shaped by human hands up to that time. It was built to ride entirely out of water from the bow back to the step. Wood and J. Smith took it out on the St. Clair River for its first trial. The single manganese bronze propeller, 20 inches across and weighing 25 pounds, sent the boat over water at 56 miles an hour. That was not a record. The Miss Minneapolis had traveled over 60 miles an hour. Also the Miss Detroit, too. But nevertheless, Wood knew he had something, an airplane engine in a boat. It was a long step towards 100 miles an hour, and Wood knew it. So you can see they're putting this airplane engine. You can talk. Yeah. You see how they're shaving down metal. They're just going to town on this engine, stripping weight.
Yeah.
Changing all these things out of it to make it that. So anyways, so the Miss Detroit 3 ends up winning this. So let me just I have it say quote on page 697. Why do I have that on here? I think I have a sweet quote for it. Here it is right here. So this is like a very quick summary. This is also from Speedboat Kings.
Yeah.
I wish I could read there was like 2 or 3 pages that leads up to this. It's so awesome. It talks about the race.
Writing. The writing in that is so rich.
Oh, totally. It's so colorful. But leading up to the quote I'm about to read,
that $900 book you got kicking around here.
I know, but I almost want to just do a reprint, man, because it's only like 130 pages. I almost wish I could just do photocopies of it and sell some copies just for people to read.
Yeah,
because
the writing is really rich.
It's amazing.
That's what
I'm saying. Like leading up to the quote I'm about to read, there's it's 3 or 4 pages where he talks about the race itself, and it's like. It is so awesome, man. It's so awesome, but we don't have time to sit here and read 3 or 4 pages.
Oh, yeah.
But so it kind of
Here's the summary, though.
But this is like the very tail end. Like the race has been won. I kind of gave away a spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. He wins the race. Yeah. So this is the quote out of Speedboat Kings. A few pages afterward, we just left off. Garwood's friends asked him after the race how fast the third, i.e. the Miss Detroit 3, was traveling down the backstretch of the course. They saw that it had shown tremendous bursts of speed in spots. At times, Wood said, we were hitting 70 miles an hour.
Nice.
The success of Wood's experiment with aircraft engines had tremendous results all over the country. Sportsmen began to buy aircraft engines for marine use. Within a very few years, almost every high-powered race boat in the country was powered with aircraft engines. Garwood had made history. So this is going to be the great secret to unlocking speed on water.
Yeah.
As these airplane engines are, because as these airplane engines are increasing in power and all this, they're going to start sticking them in boats and doing all these modifications and all this.
They're flying on the water.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it. And so we have a picture of the Miss America 3 up on screen here. This is actually a replica.
Right.
And I can't even see his name. We have it up on screen. Actually, I'll read it off because I wanted to give credit to the sources we find this stuff.
Yeah.
So the guy who did this replica, I'm going to have a tough time pronouncing it.
Robert Mishko?
Well, no, you're way off. I'm going to be off too, but you're Michaud.
Michaud?
It's spelled M-I. It's Mike. So Mike. His last name is Michaud. Michaud is the one who built this replica, and then the article comes from a website called Woody Boater, and this article that we have on screen here, I'm going to read it for those that can't see it on the screen.
Yeah.
So the website is called Woody Boater. I think it's woodyboater.com.
Okay.
But I think it's the boating website because I've read articles off of it before.
You said wood.
Yeah. Got it. That's one of my favorite shows from back in the day, Beavis and Butthead. So anyways,
12.
Yeah, I still watch clips of Beavis and Butthead to this day when they pop up. The title of the article came out April 25th, 2012, and if you can't see it on the screen, the article is called "Miss Detroit 3 Gets a New Set of Jugs," thanks to Robert Mishko at Rocky Summit Performance. If you have a chance to read this article, if you really want to go down a really cool rabbit hole with regards to these boats, this is a story. This particular article is about them finding the original Curtiss engine from the Miss Detroit 3.
Nice.
They found the original Miss Detroit 3 engine because again, the Curtiss engine, there's only a handful of them made because it didn't get used in the war.
It was a prototype, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is a story of when Garwood was like entering his later years, he had all this stuff, including the Miss America, I think it was a 7 or 8. And what he did was he donated it all to off the time I forgot. I don't want to give the wrong museum, but he donated to like a museum of some type, an automotive museum of some type. Anyways, so there's this whole story is about how this collection bounced around from different place to different place. It ended up in like a NASCAR museum. And then they were getting to the point where this stuff was just. Of course, the Miss America 8 had tremendous interest. They did something with the boat. It got sold to somebody, or it was, a focal of something. They donated a couple things to the Smithsonian, but otherwise they had all these engines there, like all these engines with parts and stuff. And so these guys who are these gearheads, this is what the story of this article is all about. Like, half this stuff is so technical, I have no clue what they're talking about. I have no clue. They're like, it was an original IOX part, carburetor remover thing. I'm like, I have no clue what they're talking about.
Motorboat.
But I did understand the parts of the story where they're talking about how these guys, they get to the point where they're just, one guy's just he's kind of in this room and he's like, hey, what's all this stuff? He's like, oh, it's a bunch of power boating, Gar Wood owned a bunch of this stuff, and there's the guy's like, well, how much you want for it? It's basically like, the guy that was buying it wasn't just some random guy off the street. He was he's a guy that's done a ton of other sort of historical work, so he was a very prime guy for them to offer it to. They knew they weren't just trying to make a buck off selling it; they were selling it to somebody that's that they knew was going to find it a good home of some capacity. Yeah. And so when the guy started actually looking up at the stuff that he's got, that's when they were like, they've got this Curtis engine in here. And then they were like, this was Gar Wood, and they were looking at the different models and how it all fit together. And they were like, this is, he talks about the provenance and how they tracked the engine down to where it got to. And they're like, this is literally the engine from the Miss Detroit 3.
Wow.
And so what's cool about the boat in the photo with this, where this replica is, because I think the Miss Detroit 3 is gone.
Because they tear them apart and use the parts for the next boat,
So I think the Miss Detroit 3 is gone, and I didn't see anything. Yeah, I didn't see anything about, but I think it's gone, which is why this replica was so cool. Was this guy spent a ton of time making this replica, and so at the time of this article, which was 2012, they were doing. The focal point of this article is how they found the engine, how they were rebuilding the engine, because there was actually still some original parts that they had not. They were spare parts in case anybody ever wanted to restart the engine.
Oh, good Lord!
They had some extra gear for it. Yeah. And so they're saying how at the time of this article, how they were getting this engine tightened up and how they were going to slot it into that replica of the Miss Detroit 3.
Hell yeah.
So it might have been a replica Miss Detroit 3, boat, but the engine was original.
Yeah.
That is the coolest thing in the world.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. I know, that's what I mean. So that's what's cool about this stuff, when you start to dive down these rabbit holes, looking into this.
Yeah.
It's just, this stuff, especially when we get to really see, how this story all, really rolls out. I mean, these are incredible historical significance. The boat's called the Miss Detroit 3.
Yeah.
Where's the Detroit? Where's its place in Detroit where people can see it?
No.
It's so it's just so cool. And once you start diving into these stories, and this is a good place to start. This article's got all kinds of links to other stories they've written about Gar Wood and some stories that have that link to Curtis. They've got some great stuff on Curtis. So it's on Glenn Curtis. That's where we're pretty much going to leave it for today with regards to the story. But it's just such a, once you just tap into this world, it's just like I said, there's so many rabbit holes. You see it for yourself. You start looking at Miss America 10 and wait till we get to that.
Yeah.
Wait till we get to
but we actually we'll be able to touch the boat and go and.
Oh, I can't wait.
We're going to sit down
such a thrill,
and record an episode sitting next to it. If
I want to be
if not in it.
I want to be in the boat. That'd be the coolest thing ever.
We're
broadcasting live on Champions Day 2022. Champions Day 2022, we are in the Miss America. That'd be the greatest
Any chance we
thrill.
fire this bad boy up?
No, no chance. And from what I understand about the Miss America 10, wait till we get to that. That thing was so fine tuned that literally only Gar Wood could drive it.
Oh, right.
And they would spend a week just getting it ready to just take on the river one time.
Wow.
That thing was the ultimate evolution of where we're going with this story. And I don't want to go too far into it.
Sure.
That thing, I've seen some videos where all they do is fire up one engine that they use for the Miss America 10. And it's deafening.
Oh,
just one of the there's a whole bank of engines. This is just So, anyways, that's where we're gonna leave it. But what we're seeing here then, is the theme is that there's more speed. If there's more speed, and they're like, well, you shouldn't do that. You heard the quote, and there it goes. hey man, the expert like, hey man, you shouldn't do that. And Garwood's like, damn what you say. I want more speed.
I feel the need for speed.
He's like, we're not going to go faster if we don't do things that we're not really supposed to do.
That's right.
And that's going to be like really the theme of the entire story of Garwood is pushing the limits, pushing the boundaries, pushing the limits.
Right.
And this is actually like sort of the mildest part. When we get to the really big stuff, there's people getting killed. There's people, setting records and dying as they set a record. There's, these people like Garwood's mechanic is going to be pronounced dead twice. Twice he's going to be pronounced legally dead from these events that they're going to be going on. These boats are going to be exploding in the middle of the river. This is like, wait till we get to the MAM. Like every single year, there's some crazy series of events that they have to overcome to just to get the boat going on the river. It's like, so anyways, this is we're starting to build a little bit of a foundation heading towards the real stuff that that really captured my attention, certainly.
I'm looking forward to it. Just as each of these stories unfolds, I just love it. So I was looking for a quote. Good judgment comes from experience. A lot of that comes from bad judgment.
Heck yeah. That's a great quote. Who said that?
Will Rogers.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he's got some great quotes, man, that guy.
Yeah, good judgment comes from experience. And a lot of that comes from bad judgment.
That's great. I love that.
I try to live my life by that one.
Yeah. Well, I don't try to live it. It just ends up living your
happens,
life.
Yeah,
it just happens. I think that's the point of his quote.
Freak show, that's my life, yeah.
It just happens like that.
All right. So thanks for hanging out. Make sure you subscribe, tell 100 friends.
I want to give one more little quick shout out to Chris Borma, who's probably be listening to this show now.
I think he's in there right now.
He's been doing a ton of work for us, helping us. We've been doing. He came up with the thumbnail concept for the back. He's the guy that helped me. He set up the Wikipedia page. I fed him the information to get it going.
Yeah.
And he's been a long time City of Champions supporter.
Yeah, he commented. He said when we said Jugs, he said, "Jugs, I thought this was a family show."
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. But Chris is we did Chris and I Chris. It was Chris's entire thing.
Yeah.
Was developing a coat of arms for the City of Champions story.
We're gonna check that out next time.
We're gonna break it down. This thing is super cool. I'm really happy about it.
It might be a tattoo. I might get a tattoo.
Maybe some stickers. It's really cool.
Oh, definitely. It's definitely going on a shirt. Maybe some stickers.
Yeah, some stickers, and then but it's also gonna be put on the corner of the thumbnails that we're doing. And he's helping us redo all the thumbnails. It was his concept that
thank you, Chris.
He came out of nowhere saying, "What do you think of this concept for your thumbnails?" And it's like immediately I showed you, and you were like, "Yeah, this is 100%." So he and I have been working back and forth to bring our listeners and viewers a whole new set of thumbnails for the show.
Bring it to life.
And we're going to go back and redo all we're redoing all the original thumbnails. We want to put them all up at the same time. And
for people that,
but it's a little more eye-catching, and maybe we'll do like a playlist with all of it so it just lays it out in order so it's all organized.
Well,
and
here's the thing.
Easily follow it.
And we keep talking about this and how important of a story it is and how underserved it is.
Exactly.
And I think that's the point of doing this is to get that message out there and just have it be a little more vibrant and be able to pull more people into the story. Because once people get into it, they're into it.
Totally.
But we gotta do that whole clickbait, get their attention. Well, not even clickbait, but it's good. Just good practice.
Yeah, it's just more. It's the stuff that Chris came up with is really eye appealing.
Yeah,
it's really.
I
think it looks really cool.
Spot on.
And it's the stuff like that makes it more friendly to click on when you're looking at it and you're going, oh, these are this looks kind of cool.
And that's the reason we do it because one, it's fun. I like hanging out. I
love
with
it.
You,
Yeah, me too.
And I love hearing the stories. And I think it's an important story, a set of stories upon stories that need to be shared and should be shared.
100%.
So
this is a story that was the foundation of Detroit sports itself. And as big as Detroit sports are in this city,
how do people not know?
that's the thing. We've said this numerous times in the show. The history,
Everybody that partied at the Krishna mansion. That was Garwood's mansion.
Everybody
went to the bar, Garwood's. It's like that. The name of the bar was about this dude.
But the thing
nobody
about
knows.
It's stories like the City of Champions season. Detroit City of Champions is an excellent example of the idea that the things that we do today came from somewhere.
Right.
They came from somewhere, and they became an institution in that somewhere. Meaning, like Detroit sports became an institution in Detroit for a reason. There were reasons why it happened, and the thing about it is that the further you get from the events, and the more you forget about the reasons of how and why they happen, the more sort of like. The less you even understand of why you even care, why that they're important to you, or why they're special, or even in this case, how they did it.
Yeah.
Are there lessons and things that we could do today to allow us to replicate the success in the community and the things that they did back then that made them such an institution then? Are there lessons that we could learn from that example to make them even bigger and better now? And I think that the City of Champions season is absolutely loaded with things like that.
I think it'll be a great springboard.
I agree.
Better things in the city. All right, like, subscribe, leave a comment. Thank you for listening. We appreciate that, and we'll do it again very, very soon. It's Detroit City of Champions, the podcast. Let's get out of the water. Wait an hour after you eat.
Yes, nice finish. Keep working on it.
I've got to find a water one. I don't know.